She was everywhere online, smiling, posting, performing, but offline. She couldn't remember the last time she felt real. Stay with me. What happens at the end of this story changes everything. This is File 008, the woman who forgot who she was online.
She couldn't remember the last time she'd smiled without checking if anyone saw. The mirror in her bathroom had become a screen. Something essential had leaked out of her, pixel by pixel, and she hadn't noticed until it was almost gone. Her name was Marina, though online she went by something else, something curated, something that tested well with the algorithm. She was 32 when she realized she'd stopped existing in rooms where no one was recording. Not dramatically. Not all at once. It happened the way light leaves the sky in winter, so gradually you don't notice until you're standing in the dark. She'd started posting 5 years ago. Just photos at first. Coffee cups and sunsets, and the usual performance of a life well lived. She wasn't trying to be an That's what she told herself. She just wanted to share. To connect. To be part of something that felt bigger than her small apartment and her adequate job and the creeping sense that she was disappearing into her own ordinary existence. The first 100 followers felt like validation. The first 1,000 felt like proof. That she mattered. That she was interesting. That people cared what she thought about books and fashion and the tiny moments she could frame beautifully enough to deserve attention. She got better at it. Everyone does. You learn what works. What gets engagement. What makes people stop scrolling. You learn to turn your life into content, your thoughts into captions, your face into a brand. It doesn't feel like selling out because you're just being yourself. Except you're being the version of yourself that performs best. The version that gets likes. The version people want to see. Stay with me. What happens at the end changes how you see everything. Marina's posts were aspirational but relatable. Polished but authentic. She'd mastered the contradiction that makes digital presence work. She shared her struggles, but only the ones that were sympathetic. She showed her flaws, but only the ones that were endearing. She was vulnerable in ways that felt brave, but never uncomfortable. She gave people what they needed to feel close to her, without ever letting them actually in. Her following grew. 5,000, 10,000, 20. Brands started reaching out. Small ones at first, then bigger. Nothing huge. She wasn't famous, but she was visible enough to monetize. Visible enough that strangers recognized her voice. Visible enough that she started structuring her days around what she could post. The coffee wasn't just coffee anymore. It was content. The walk wasn't just a walk. It was a story. The book she read wasn't just a book. It was an opportunity to say something insightful that would resonate. Everything became material. Everything became performance. And slowly, without her realizing it, the performance became the only thing that felt real. She started checking her phone first thing in the morning, before she was fully awake. Before she remembered who she was. She'd look at the numbers. The metrics. The validation rendered in data. Good posts meant good days. Bad posts meant something was wrong with her. She knew this was unhealthy. She knew this was exactly what the platforms wanted. But knowing didn't make her stop. Her boyfriend noticed before she did. He said she was different. That she wasn't present. That even when they were together, she was somewhere else. Composing captions in her head. Thinking about angles. Wondering if the moment they were having was worth sharing. She told him he didn't understand. That this was her community. Her creative outlet. Her work. He said it used to be those things. Now it just seemed like an addiction. They broke up on a Tuesday. She cried, real tears. Then she thought about whether she should post about it. Not the details. Just something vague and poetic about growth and change. Something that would let people know she was going through something without actually revealing what. She drafted the post 3 times before deciding it was too soon. But she saved the drafts, just in case. That's when she started noticing the gaps. Small ones at first. She'd be in a conversation and realize she didn't know what she actually thought about something. She only knew what her audience would want her to think. What would play well? What would get engagement? Her opinions weren't opinions anymore. They were positions. Calculated, strategic, designed to build the right kind of community around her. She'd go to restaurants and spend 10 minutes photographing food before she ate it. By the time she took a bite, it was cold. She didn't care. The photo was good. That's what mattered. She went to museums and spent more time framing shots than looking at art. She went to parties and felt like she was watching herself from outside her body, narrating her own life in real time, turning every moment into content before she'd actually experienced it. If you're still listening, don't stop now. Most people never see this coming. The panic attack happened at a friend's wedding. She was holding her phone, trying to capture the first dance, when she realized she didn't actually know the bride that well anymore. They'd been close once, years ago, before Marina had turned every friendship into content, before every interaction became a potential post. She looked around the room and realized she didn't know most of these people. Not really. She knew their faces, their public selves. But she couldn't remember the last time she'd had a conversation that wasn't interrupted by her checking her phone. She locked herself in the bathroom and couldn't breathe. Not dramatically. Just shallow, insufficient breaths that wouldn't fill her lungs. She looked at herself in the mirror. Really looked. And she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The face was hers. But the person behind it felt like a stranger. A carefully constructed character she'd been playing so long, she'd forgotten she was acting. She stopped posting for 3 days, then 5, then a week. Her followers started asking if she was okay. The messages were kind, but they felt invasive. Like they had a right to her presence. Like she owed them her life in digestible increments. She didn't know how to explain that she needed to disappear for a while. That she needed to figure out who she was when no one was watching. The silence was worse than she expected. Not from the world, from herself. Without the constant production of content, without the feedback loop of likes and comments and validation, she didn't know what to do with herself. She didn't know what she liked, what she wanted, what she thought about anything. She'd outsourced her identity to an audience, and now she was alone, with nothing but the scaffolding of a self. She tried journaling. Real journaling. Not the kind that could be screenshotted and shared. Private thoughts that no one would ever see. But she couldn't do it. Every sentence felt performative. Every observation felt like it was written for an invisible audience. She'd trained herself to think in captions, to narrate her life as content. She didn't know how to just exist without commentary. Her therapist said she was experiencing a kind of identity dissolution. That she'd become so focused on being perceived that she'd stopped perceiving herself. That the validated self and the actual self had diverged so completely that she no longer knew which one was real, or if either one was. The therapist said this was common now, that they saw it all the time. People who'd built entire identities online, and then realized they had nothing underneath. Marina asked what she was supposed to do about it. The therapist said she needed to disconnect, fully. Not just stop posting, but stop consuming. Stop scrolling. Stop watching other people perform their lives. Stop measuring herself against curated versions of reality. She needed to sit with herself in the silence and figure out who she was when no one was looking. It sounded impossible, but she tried. She deleted the apps from her phone, not the accounts. She wasn't ready for that. But the apps, the access, the constant temptation to check in, to see what people were saying, to make sure she still existed in the space she'd built. The first week was hell. She reached for her phone 100 times a day. Muscle memory, compulsion. She felt phantom vibrations, phantom notifications. Her brain kept checking for dopamine hits that weren't coming. She felt irritable, anxious, unmoored, like she was floating in space with nothing to hold on to. But slowly, something shifted. She started noticing things she'd stopped seeing. The way light moved across her apartment in the afternoon. The taste of coffee when she wasn't photographing it. The sound of rain without thinking about whether it was good weather for content. Small things, boring things, things that wouldn't get likes, things that were just hers. She started taking walks without her phone. At first, it felt dangerous. What if something happened? What if she missed something important? But nothing happened. Nothing was that important. She just walked. Looked at trees, watched people, existed in her body without narrating it, without turning it into a story someone else could consume. Watch until the end. This isn't the story you think it is. One afternoon, about 6 weeks into her digital silence, she was sitting in a park when a woman approached her. Mid-20s, nervous smile, phone in hand. The woman said she followed Marina online, that Marina's posts had meant a lot to her, that she seemed so authentic, so real, so comfortable with herself. Could they take a photo together? Marina said no, not rudely, just honestly. She said she was taking a break, that she was trying to figure some things out. The woman looked confused, then disappointed. Like Marina had broken a contract she didn't know she'd signed. Like she owed this stranger her image, her time, her performance. After the woman left, Marina sat there thinking about what she'd said. That Marina seemed authentic, comfortable with herself. The irony was crushing. She'd been dying inside, collapsing, losing herself completely. And from the outside, she'd looked perfectly fine, better than fine, aspirational, like she had it all figured out. That's when she understood. Everyone was doing this. Everyone was performing. Everyone was curating their lives into content and slowly disappearing behind the curation. The whole thing was a mass delusion. A collective agreement to pretend that these digital selves were real, while the actual selves withered from neglect. She thought about going back, about posting something real, something raw, about what she'd been going through. But she knew how it would play. It would be inspiring, brave, vulnerable. It would get great engagement, and she'd be right back in the loop, feeding the machine, turning her recovery into content, monetizing her breakdown. So she didn't. She just sat there, existed. Let herself be unknown. Months passed. She got a new job, one that had nothing to do with her online presence. She made friends the old way. Slowly, through actual proximity and shared experience, she had conversations that went nowhere, that didn't build toward anything, that were just the mundane pleasure of human connection without purpose or performance. She still thought about going back sometimes. The pull was always there. The desire to be seen, to matter, to have proof that she existed in a way that counted. But she didn't. She'd seen what it cost. The hole it carved in the center of her life. The way it turned everything into transaction, into content, into performance. One night, almost a year after she'd stopped posting, she logged back in, just to look. Her account was still there, frozen in time. Thousands of followers waiting for her to return. Messages asking where she'd gone. Brands still reaching out about collaborations. The machine still wanted her, still had a place for her, still promised validation and visibility and proof that she mattered. She looked at her old posts, the curated photos, the careful captions. The woman in those images looked happy, confident, together, like she knew exactly who she was. Marina remembered being that woman, remembered the desperate performance, the constant anxiety, the slow erosion of anything real. And here's the thing nobody tells you. The thing Marina finally understood. She'd spent 5 years building a self online, curating an identity, creating a version of herself that was likable and successful and worth following. And that version was more real to thousands of people than she was to herself. That woman in the photos existed. She had impact. She mattered to people. She changed how they saw themselves. But Marina, the actual woman sitting alone in her apartment, had almost completely disappeared. She'd been so busy being visible that she'd become invisible to herself. And the cruelest part was that she'd done it willingly, eagerly. She'd carved herself hollow and filled the space with performance, because the performance got love and the real thing got nothing. She didn't delete the account. That would have been too dramatic, too final. She just left it there. A monument to the woman she'd pretended to be. A ghost of a self that thousands of people had loved but had never actually existed. She closed the app, put down her phone, looked around her apartment. Small, quiet, ordinary hers. She didn't know exactly who she was yet, but she knew she was real. She could feel herself existing without being seen. And that was something. That was a start. The screen went dark, and Marina was still there. If this story resonated with you, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Your presence helps this archive exist.